So I'll show you the preset on this image here because I think it demonstrates the process quite well. We have this lady here who's the subject, but there's also a lot going on around her which distracts the eye. Your eye's drawn over here because it's very light value. Your eye's drawn down here because there's a big block of blue here. So it makes the eye like dot around the image quite a lot. And with my photography, I like the eye to feel relaxed, if that makes sense. And the way I do that is with split toning, with just really having two dominant colors, um, and then using the gradient filters to isolate and like play with the light and isolate a subject. So this is the final image after the preset is applied. So I'll show you how we got there with this image here. So what I like to do first is just do a basic crop. This lady was front and center. She was a little bit off center there, so I just cropped in a little bit, so it's just right in the middle. And then I like to do basic adjustment. This calibration is off usually. So I like to do basic adjustment just with highlights, bringing the highlights down so you start getting the details in the highlights up here. As you can see, you can't see the detail there, but it just brings the detail in. Shadows as well, like you can see under here. I just like to push the shadows up so I have as much detail to play with. I'm not worried about, obviously there's lots of color or changes in color here. I'm not worried about that. I'm just trying to get as much information onto the photo as possible so that I can take it into the color mixer. And this is where, with the color mixer, what I'm trying to do is create like a flat tone across the whole image, or a flat value of color across the whole image, or as flat as possible, so that the eye isn't distracted by all these other colors. You can see, with the magenta, I've desaturated the purple, the blues, aquas, and also the greens have desaturated quite a lot. And I'm really just focusing on these three, the warm colors in the actual image, and then I'll reintroduce the cool colors, or the cooler colors in the color grading. So with the blue here, you can see if saturation was left high, you've still got this massive color block of blue here. You have the blue stripe. It doesn't fit the image. So what I like to do is just desaturate to a point where there's still value there. You can still see that as blue. And then when I color grade, it has something to cling to, but it's more in fitting with the sepia tone. So it's kind of like a sepia tone, but trying to just subtly bring in some of the other colors as well, but make them fit. So with the yellows and the oranges, I like to push the yellows pretty much all the way down to the left, and just make them more towards the red, more orangey. And then with the oranges, I like to do like, so that's on like the 25% mark down here. Reds usually stay around center in terms of the hue, but with the oranges and the yellows, what I like to do is also increase the luminance, because with street photography, a lot of the time you're shooting subjects and the focus is on the face, or on the skin tones, and this helps, just as you can see, just brings out the highlights, that it's the contrast of the face a little bit. So with the oranges and the yellows, I'm bringing out the contrast of the face a little bit. Once you have this sort of flattish sepia tone going, then you can use the color grading to bring the blues back. So you've got the cooler tones coming back based on value rather than what's in the scene. So as you can see here, this has become more blue, and because it already had a slight tint of blue, it's sort of the color grading has clung to it a bit. So what I like to do is, on the shadows, I'll put a deeper blue. So from that to that, on the highlights, I like to put like a teal, or a cyan color on the highlights. And you can see it just takes out the magenta from the highlights a little bit. I don't know if that'll show on the video or not. And then in the midtones, I like to bring in a little bit of the warmth back in the midtones, because you would have lost it through the shadows and the highlights being blue. So that's the color grading. Blending, subjective, but I like to usually put that on 100 and then adjust the balance based on where I want it. If you push it to the right, it's more sepia. If you push it to the left, it's going to be more blue. So just find a good balance there. I then go into the tone curve, and this is where I just crush the blacks a little bit with this soft contrast curve, and I'll play with this at the end to get the right value usually. And then with the reds, I like to take some of the reds back out of the midtones by pushing to the right. And then with the greens, I like to push a little bit of green back into the midtones. And the reason I do that is I just think it gives a little bit of more of a cinematic look. So over there, it's a bit too magenta, and it just brings a little bit more green back into the entire image without touching the highlights or the shadows too much. After that, I go back into basic and I'll do things like reduce the exposure to a point where it looks a bit better. I'll sometimes play with the contrast here. I'll bring in the saturation again, maybe a little bit of vibrance, and then a little bit of dehaze as well. This helps it doesn't really help on this image, but it does help when you're using a Black Mist Pro. I think I was using a 1/8, maybe a quarter here, but if you're shooting any sort of foliage outdoors, anything where you have the natural haze of the environment, it's sometimes good just to put a little bit of dehaze in your preset, just to get a little bit of that micro contrast back and things like leaves and distant trees and things like that. So after I've done that, what I usually do is I'll go down to calibration. So effects, just a standard sort of vignette around the outside. Calibration, this is where I like to play around a little bit and get like this is sort of like fine tuning. You can see if it's off, it's a little bit too blue. On, it's a little bit richer. It's subjective. But I usually what I do here is I use the skin tones to calibrate this. So this is where it would have been. So I'm just what I'm doing here is just playing with the tint, just trying to find a good. You see, when I push it down to the left, it's very green in the shadows. If I push it to the right, it becomes very magenta. So this is just like fine tuning, especially around the skin tones, the red primary as well, especially around the skin tones. As you can see, sort of like pigments the face as I push it from left to right. So again, it's just finding the right balance where the skin tones look as natural as possible in the context of the photo. And sometimes being zoomed in isn't actually the best place to do it, because when you zoom out it looks wrong again. And then with the blue primary, this is actually a good way to change the feel of an image as well. But yeah, I'm just sort of fine tuning a little bit there in the calibration. I did forget to mention that I also use nostalgic negative on the profile here. So after that, what I like to do is, this is where I want to play with the light. So I'll usually bring this down to about -2 exposure, and then I'll go into the gradient masks, and first I'll highlight the subject. I'll then bring in some light from the left. I'll then maybe darken, bring in some light from the right, darken the left a little bit, and I'll do a few other things as well. I'm not sure if I can turn off a mask one by one. Easy. Not sure how to do that. But yeah, so highlight the subject, bring in light from the right, and the way I do this is I just push the exposure right up, minus on the contrast, minus on the dehaze and the clarity, and then I just use the so I usually have these set up as presets. I'll apply it and then just adjust the amount. So I'll have like a left one, top left corner, top left corner, top right corner, bottom left, bottom right, and I'll just add them as needed and adjust, just for speed. And then little things like this is just highlighting the right of this lady. Again, just playing with light. See, it just highlights, just pulls her out a little bit, just gives a bit more contrast. And then I also do like minor things like this log down here was I just wanted to desaturate because it kept on, my eye kept on getting distracted to it, so just desaturated it. I think that's it. Pretty much it. I added quite a lot of grain. This is my vignette settings, my grain settings. I do, for these I did go for quite a lot of grain in the shadows. Just the style I wanted to go for, but you don't have to add that. So I'll show you now how I can take that preset, and because of the way the preset works, by removing or desaturating a lot of the color, then reintroducing the color the way that I want it to be reintroduced, I can take pretty much any photo and give it that style, and it will work together in conjunction with the others in the series. So it's good for if making coffee table books, or you're putting prints on walls, or or you just want images that work together in a series for Instagram. This is a good way of doing it. So I'll apply the preset. First thing I do is get the exposure, and then what I'll do is I'll use the white balance. I'll just go as shot. Usually I don't save the white balance in the preset. I'll just allow my white balance settings at the time to direct where the white balance starts, but I'll adjust it usually based on, you can see as I'm going over to the left here, the highlights are pushing in blues from over here. You don't want the blues to like encroach on the face and the skin tones too much. So you just find a nice spot where you get this good split tone of the blues leading into the like the cooler colors leading into the warmer colors. So after I've found that, and it's an image that I really like, a lot of images I won't actually add gradients on, but if there's an image I really like, I will do. So again, I'm going to desaturate that all the way down to -2. I'm going to go into the gradients and then start playing around by increasing. So highlight my subject, just increase him a little bit. I then want to put a linear gradient from over here because this is where the light's coming from. So I usually want to like emphasize that. And again, you can use this color temp down here if there's too much blue being introduced, just to dial it back a little bit. So there was subjects over here, so I think what I did was also decrease the exposure here, but then increased exposure around the lamp itself, just to bring that out. And yeah, this is where you can just get creative. Just put something in and just start playing with it. Change the color temperature and the exposure, and just play around until you find something that works.